All right. So I put together some slides just to kind of show you guys some images of Native American tribes in Texas to give you a better idea of how each culture lived. So we're going to start with the Plains tribes. They were located in the Great Plains region that was located from the Panhandle to the Red River, right through here where that big circle is. And let's talk about, first we have the two tribes that we're going to study from the Plains. It was the Comanche and the Apache. And let's look at the food that they ate. Well, since they were nomadic and they were hunters, they primarily ate buffalo. In fact, they used buffalo for pretty much everything. They would eat wild rabbits. They were hunters. You need to know that. They were hunters. They also ate something called pemmican. Now, pemmican is like the world's first protein bar. They would take dried animal meat and animal fat, and they would use berries, and they would mush it up, and it was good because it was small. It would give them enough calories to get through the day, and when they burned a lot of calories, and so it was easy to carry on them because they were traveling on horses because they were nomadic. So let's talk about their housing. Well, if you're going to be traveling, you need something convenient. So this is going to be the tribe that lived in teepees. I know that most people think most Native Americans lived in teepees. That is not the case. Some examples, some of them were very decorative. Some of them were pretty plain. Some tribes did live in small communities. So, kind of like a tent. All right, their clothing and appearance. Our Plains tribes typically wore loincloths, and because they were hunters, they needed something lightweight. Texas is hot. Many of them were your traditional looking Native Americans, long hair. They were known for shaving one side of their head. And they did do body piercing. They would use bamboo or cane to pierce parts of their body. So their government beliefs or adaptations, they did what was called platform burials. Most people think that they would do this to burn them. They did not. They actually, if a member of their tribe died because they traveled so much that they were in the middle of a hunt, they would construct a platform burial and place the body up top to keep critters from eating it, hopefully, and buzzards. And then when they would come back from their hunt, sometimes days, weeks later, then they would have a traditional burial. They did spirit dances. Sometimes they would do dances to try to bring on rain or a good hunt. These were called mitotes. And they were expert horsemen. They could literally ride a horse, hanging off one side, and still make a kill. These guys were the real deal. He's not falling, he's doing that on purpose. All right, our Gulf Coast tribes, they're going to be located down here. We call them the Gulf Coast tribes because they are located along the Gulf of Mexico. Now, for food, these tribes fished. Gulf Coast region has all the waterways, so they fished. They would also eat bugs, worms, lizards, oysters. I don't know, kind of cool. Their housing, they had something that was temporary. You can see in the image that it's kind of made out of sticks and grass. Something that if bad weather came off the Gulf, it wasn't too terrible if it fell down. They were very nomadic. Okay, you can see here, kind of dome shaped. So again, kind of like a tent, they were nomadic. All right, clothing and appearance. They wore loincloths and yucca sandals. They were considered to be very tall, taller than most Native Americans in the time. They did do body tattoos. And they wore yucca sandals, so they would take the outside parts of the yucca plant and weave them into sandals because sand does get hot in Texas. The loincloths, again, and the body tattoos and piercings. And their government and beliefs. They also did spirit dances called mitotes, and for the same reason. They thought it was a way to bond with their gods. One of their big adaptations was something called a dugout canoe. So as this, you should know, this area has a lot of timber or trees. So they would take these bodark trees and they would burn the inside of them and then they would dig it out. This is called a dugout canoe. And this was to help them get up and down the waterways. I'm saying that word. They would use alligator fat to waterproof their pots or pans or canoes, and they would rub it on themselves to keep mosquitoes away. So if you think off-brand or off-spray, mosquito spray smells bad, imagine being rubbed down in alligator fat. They believed in, they had a shaman. So a shaman functioned as their tribal doctor and their religious leader. Your southeastern tribes. Now, these are located up here. So in the northern part of the coastal plains and the north central plains. These are going to be our most advanced tribes. There are the Caddo and the Wichita and also the Atakapan. We don't talk about them much. They all kind of live this similar lifestyle. So these guys, unlike the last two culture groups, these guys were not nomadic. They were sedentary. That means they stayed in one place, which meant they could farm. So they farmed corn and beans and squash, and they also hunted. They would send hunting parties out to go and hunt the buffalo. These guys lived in permanent beehive-shaped houses. So unlike our Gulf Coast tribes that had those smaller huts, these guys had these, you can see how tall they are when you can see compared to what the images of the people look like. They had holes in the top. They would make little water stops down here to keep the water out. And this is because they did not move. They made permanent settlements. Some more images of what these look like. Again, permanent sedentary homes. They also wore loincloths, but they would make dresses out of deer's hide and buffalo hide. They wore moccasins. You've probably seen those. They did face painting and tattoos. They believed in what we call burial mounds. This is very similar. You'll see they would bury their high-ranking people of the tribe in these mounds. So kind of like the pyramids with the Egyptians. Now, one of their adaptations, which is really cool, is this thing called a trot line, okay, or a trout line. They would take a string and they would run it across the stream, and then along the string, they would put more string but hooks at the bottom. So they were catching more than one fish at a time. And their cradle boards, now we have something similar to this today. You've seen the little pouches that babies are carried on by their parents. This is called the cradle board. These were passed down from generation to generation. This is so that mothers could strap the babies on and get back to work because the women did a lot of the farming. As you can see, John Legend and his own little cradle board. And our Pueblo tribes. Over here in the Mountains and Basins region, these guys also did a little bit of farming. They had corn and beans, desert plants. It is a very dry area, but you already knew that. We're talking about the Humano tribe. They lived in these neat looking kind of huts they made out of adobe brick. Okay, and they would usually build them on the side of a mountain, so they only had to build one side. Or they already had one side built. Okay, so you can kind of see that here, also with a little bit of grass. Used a lot of clay, but mostly that adobe brick. That's their big adaptation for their housing. So if they made a brick house, that means that they were also sedentary. They did not travel and hunt their food. Here's a little bit more elaborate adobe housing. You can see it's several stories high. Now, these guys, I recognize that haircut, also did the face painting and the tattooing. So that's where that haircut comes from. Okay, they wore the loincloths. Again, that adobe brick, I cannot stress it enough. They were also very friendly to neighbors. They didn't have a lot of people around them. It's a very dry area, so they didn't have a lot of others around them. So the people that would come around, they would want to trade. And so they would be super friendly. They did figure out how to make an aqueduct so that they could actually farm, right? Irrigation, the word I was looking for, irrigation. So they could actually make the beans and the corn. So, yes, new with irrigation. All right, and those are just some of the images I wanted to show you for the 4 major groups of Native Americans.